is there one specific biggest threat that you find facing the state?
Well, I think the threat that's facing our country right now, and obviously as a result of that, facing our state as well, is the attack on democracy. And I take this issue very personally, not just as an American, but as someone who's the story of my family is a story of the reversal of democracy, the erosion of democracy. My great-grandparents, when they were younger than I was, fled Eastern Europe seeking refuge in Uruguay. They escaped fascism, where many of the members of their family would go on to die in the Holocaust. My grandparents and my parents grew up in Uruguay, right? That new home, the refuge that my great-grandparents had found. When my parents were young, there was a coup in Uruguay, and democracy in Uruguay eroded. And they became the second and third generation consecutively in my family to watch democracy erode, watch democracy fall apart. They spent 12 years, my parents and my grandparents, 12 years living under a military dictatorship. And here I am, the fourth generation in my family, to be watching the decline of democracy here in the United States of America, the country that my family immigrated to, watching democracy decline here in the country that I love. And we are not going to accept that. I will not be the fourth generation in my family to lose our democracy. But when I was in graduate school, I had a professor who had been an expert on the fall of Uruguayan democracy. She happened to be studying abroad there when there was a coup. And let me tell you, there aren't many experts on the fall of Uruguayan democracy. What she told me that really scares me, that terrifies me, and is part of the reason that I'm running for Congress, the same trends that she saw in Uruguay at the time of the collapse of democracy there are the same trends that she sees here in the United States of America. You have an authoritarian, fascist, far-right movement trying to undermine our democratic institutions and chip away at our fundamental rights. And then you have, another big part of the country looking at our democracy and saying, well, government's not doing anything for me. Government's not delivering for me. So what's the point in fighting for it? And when those two forces came together in Uruguay, it led to the fall of democracy there. And so we have a mission here, we have an obligation here, which is to fight back against the far-right, fascist, authoritarian movement, whatever you want to call it, and push back against their efforts to undermine our democracy and erode our fundamental rights, but also restore faith in democratic governance and show everyone, in particular young people, that democracy can still deliver for them.
Well, protecting democracy is not a small feat for the entire country, but especially one person. So how specifically do you think in your position would you be able to help do that, combating the erosion of democracy? And what would your other legislative priorities be as a member of Congress?
Look, the key to this is it's twofold, like I just said. One is being a brick wall against efforts to erode our democracy. Pushing back against attacks on voting rights and LGBTQ plus rights and reproductive rights that we're seeing all across the country right now at the state level. I believe Congress must codify abortion rights in the Constitution. In Maryland, we codify them in our Constitution. I think that Congress should pass a law codifying abortion rights. I think that we should pass the Equality Act and other protections for LGBTQ plus people. I think we should pass legislation to move forward with voting rights, securing voting rights in response to the attacks that we're seeing all across the country. And I think we have to take every measure possible to strengthen our democracy. But that's not enough, because the people that I'm talking to every day, right, look at me and look at the issues that we're talking about and say, well, why has nothing been done yet? Why has our democracy done so little on the challenges of our time? And you look at young people in particular, and poll after poll after poll shows that young people are growing more and more disillusioned, more and more hopeless with our government, and more hopeless about our future. And when we have that hopelessness and we have that growing disillusion, that's when people start to lose faith in our government, and that's really when we have a problem. So yes, we're gonna fight to restore our fundamental rights and fight to move our democracy forward and strengthen our democracy, but also just make government work again. And by making government work again, showing people, that's been my mission in the state legislature. It's been working hard to deliver. We've delivered on mental health. I secured $5 million in funding to forgive the student debt of school psychologists, school social workers, to recruit and retain more mental health professionals from our public schools. We passed a major bill addressing the fentanyl overdose epidemic that we're seeing in our state, addressing the surge in hate crimes, modernizing our government's regulations, right, to keep up with the times. All of those issues demonstrate that government can still work, and those will be my priorities in Congress as well, taking on the mental health crisis that we see, in particular the mental health crisis that we see amongst young people, right? We saw a report recently that 1/3 of high school women in our country have considered or attempted suicide. We see astronomical, devastating rates of suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression amongst all young people. You look at marginalized groups and they're even more at risk, right? The opioid overdose epidemic, you go across my district and you see the consequence of a lack of investment in treatment, prevention, and recovery for those dealing with substance use disorder. And we have a lot of work to do on those two fronts, and those will continue to be my two top priorities in Congress.